On June 4, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio stood before Congress and said the words clearly, "Operation Epic Fury is over. The war with Iran," he insisted, "is done." But here is what was happening at almost exactly the same time. Iranian drones struck Kuwait International Airport's passenger terminal, killing at least one person and injuring 63 others. Iran also claimed falsely, according to U.S. Central Command, to have targeted a U.S. Navy destroyer in the Gulf of Oman and to have hit the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. Tonight, we ask the question that millions of people in the Middle East, the United States, and around the world are asking: if the war is over, why is Iran still shooting? In the next 7 minutes, we are going to walk you through the full picture. We will cover the Kuwait airport strike and Iran's claims that U.S. interceptors caused the damage in CENTCOM's direct rebuttal. We will look at what the Wall Street Journal is exclusively reporting about Tehran's repeated strikes threatening the ceasefire. We will examine what Iran's foreign minister said about the state of nuclear talks. We will break down what foreign policy is reporting about the Hormuz crisis and Europe's energy exposure. And we will ask the most important question nobody wants to answer: is there actually a plan to end this? Subscribe and stay with us. Let us build the timeline. On June 2, late evening Washington time, U.S. Central Command posted a direct rebuttal to Iranian claims, stating that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had falsely claimed to have struck U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain and a U.S. airbase in the region. CENTCOM's language was unambiguous: all Iranian attacks on American forces failed. In the early hours of June 3, CENTCOM reported that a fresh wave of Iranian drones targeting U.S. forces in Kuwait had again been downed by American air defenses, with no personnel or assets harmed. By morning on June 3, Middle East Eye was tracking day 96 of the war in its live blog, noting an explosion near Iran's redirected 125 commercial vessels and disabled 6 as part of the U.S. naval blockade of Iran in the Arabian Sea. Meanwhile, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told Al Jazeera English that no progress had been made in talks with the United States, though communication channels remain open, and characterized Iran's Gulf attacks as self-defense. Against this backdrop of active combat, Secretary Rubio told Congress in clips posted by AFP that sustained strikes inside Iran to degrade their military have stopped because, in his words, epic fury is over. According to the Wall Street Journal's exclusive reporting on June 4, U.S. officials say repeated Tehran strikes have ratcheted up pressure on President Trump and are casting doubt on the long-term viability of the ceasefire itself. The first question many viewers are asking is, how can the Secretary of State declare the war over when attacks are still happening and civilians are still dying? The short answer is that there is a deliberate definitional distinction at work. The administration appears to be arguing that Operation Epic Fury, defined as the active U.S. campaign of sustained strikes inside Iran to degrade its military, has concluded as a phase of operations, even while the broader conflict, including Iranian retaliatory strikes on U.S. partners and Gulf states, continues. This framing allows Rubio to make a technically defensible statement while the operational reality on the ground remains fluid and dangerous. Critics and some intelligence analysts would note that Iran's continued attacks on Kuwait, its claims about targeting U.S. naval assets, and its foreign minister's admission that talks have produced no progress suggest that Tehran does not share the administration's definition of a concluded war. A second pressing question is, what does the Wall Street Journal's reporting about ceasefire viability actually mean? On that front, the Wall Street Journal exclusive citing U.S. officials that repeated Tehran strikes are casting doubt on the long-term viability of the ceasefire may suggest that what the administration is publicly calling an ended war is, in private diplomatic channels, still an active negotiation with no guaranteed outcome. Foreign policy adds important economic context, reporting that the Hormuz crisis has validated every fear held by European countries that had diversified their liquefied natural gas supplies to reduce Gulf exposure, meaning European energy markets remain under pressure regardless of how the administration characterizes the war's status. Some analysts believe the disconnect between Rubio's public declaration and the classified intelligence picture may be one of the most consequential gaps in public information management of this entire conflict. How can the U.S. Secretary of State declare the war over when Iranian attacks on civilian targets are still happening? The administration may be drawing a line between the active U.S. strike campaign against Iranian military infrastructure, which it says has ended, and the broader conflict, including ongoing Iranian retaliation. This framing is legally and diplomatically intentional but leaves a significant gap between the official narrative and the operational reality experienced by civilian populations in Kuwait and across the Gulf. What does the Wall Street Journal's exclusive reporting about the ceasefire's viability actually mean for the weeks ahead? Private U.S. diplomatic channels may reflect a significantly more uncertain picture than public statements suggest. Iran's FM admitting no negotiating progress, combined with continued strikes, may indicate Tehran is using ongoing military pressure as a negotiating tool, testing whether the administration will re-engage militarily or accept a degraded status quo. In the United States, the credibility gap between Rubio's war is over declaration and the continued violence is becoming a domestic political flashpoint. As we reported in our previous video on the House War Powers Resolution, even Trump-backed Republican candidates are privately worried about the political cost of an open-ended conflict. The administration now faces the challenge of managing both a hostile Congress and an information environment where CENTCOM's own real-time fact-checking posts are directly contradicting Iranian narratives, revealing the active information war being fought alongside the kinetic one. Across the Gulf states, particularly Kuwait and Bahrain, the impact is immediate and deeply personal. Kuwait's civilian airport was struck by a deliberate Iranian barrage, killing at least one person and injuring 63. The fact that Kuwait was targeted despite denying its airspace was used for strikes against Iran signals Iran's willingness to punish neutral parties and expand the conflict's geographic footprint in ways that threaten regional civilian infrastructure. In Europe, the Hormuz crisis has validated every energy security fear that drove the continent's LNG diversification strategy, according to foreign policy analysis. European energy ministers and consumers are watching the Gulf closely, knowing that any sustained closure of the Strait of Hormuz would reverberate through fuel prices across the continent. For Iran's domestic population and leadership, the picture is complex. CGTN reported on June 3 that Trump was claiming to be approaching a deal with Iran and hinting at a possible meeting with Iran's supreme leader, even as Iran's own foreign minister was publicly denying any negotiating progress. This contradictory signaling from both capitals may suggest back-channel communications exist that neither side is yet willing to acknowledge publicly. To be fair to the administration's position, the strongest version of their argument deserves a full hearing. The Rubio framing that sustained U.S. strikes to degrade Iran's military have ended may represent a genuine and strategically deliberate de-escalation signal designed to create diplomatic space for a deal. CGTN reported that Trump himself was claiming to be approaching an agreement with Iran and floating the possibility of a meeting with the supreme leader, which, if accurate, would suggest the declaration of epic fury's end is part of a negotiating posture rather than a denial of reality. There is also a credible national security argument that declaring an end to offensive operations, even while maintaining defensive posture and the naval blockade, can lower the risk of inadvertent escalation. Iran's continued strikes may themselves be final pressure tactics before a deal, not evidence that the war is genuinely resuming. Some analysts believe the administration is attempting to thread a needle, satisfying domestic political pressure to end the conflict while preserving enough leverage through the blockade and forward-deployed forces to negotiate from a position of strength. Here is the kicker: Trump is publicly floating a meeting with Iran's supreme leader. Iran's foreign minister is publicly saying no progress has been made. CENTCOM is publicly refuting Iranian military claims in real time. Three different governments are all telling three different stories about the same war, and only one of them can be right. Drop your read on this in the comments. Do you think the US and Iran are genuinely moving toward a deal, or is this a war that still has no end in sight? We read every single comment.